What up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Nerd Cosa Nostra, and this is Reign of Horror. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone had a great weekend and a great Monday thus far. Depending upon where you're located, you could still be on Monday. You might already be well into your Tuesday. And if you are, good morning and happy Tuesday. You are already closer to the weekend than some of us are, so that's always a plus. So had a great day, better than I deserve, and right back into it. We got some updates coming out there, some confirmations on some additional sequels to a couple of franchises. Two franchises I happen to enjoy. One of them, the original film, was a bit of a surprise for me. Didn't see it coming. Rather enjoyed it, and I'm happy that we finally have confirmation that we will be getting a sequel to it. I think, again, this is one of those films I believe we always knew was probably going to get a sequel, but as we all know, within the horror genre, depending upon the crowd reaction, crowd response to any of these types of films, unless they're one of the OG major villains or major franchises, it's always really up in the air whether or not we would get any sequels to many of these films. But we will talk about two franchises that are getting sequels and are moving forward, which is good. I think one of them's actually already started production, which is even better. Got some Beetlejuice updates. I mean, obviously, if you haven't seen the film already, might be somewhat surprised. It's still in theaters in many places, but it's obviously already on streaming, available for rent as well on some streaming platforms. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. I think it was a nice addition, a nice sequel. Again, if you grew up with the original Beetlejuice, I think it did justice considering how much time had passed since the first one. I think the second one was a nice addition, and it obviously floored studio execs' expectations as far as the love that the sequel was gonna did get, and obviously the box office results it got. So I know there's been some rumors floating around out there that due to the success of this film, based on the budget that it was given, and it wasn't even given the full budget that Tim Burton had requested. He actually got less than he requested, still made it work, still made it a success. And now there's rumors that they want a third film, and Michael Keaton's already come out and said he's obviously down to do a third film. It's just whether or not now you can get the rest of the cast, if they're necessary and if they're needed, if you can get Tim Burton back. And also, you got to have the right script. I mean, that's what it boils down to. I think you can have 90% of everything else there, but if the script isn't right and the story isn't good, it doesn't matter what stars you have behind it, in it, what director's a part of it. It could still be an absolute failure. And we could probably sit here and take the rest of the show, and I can go out there and probably pull a dozen examples of where certain films had an amazing cast, an amazing director, and it absolutely flopped. And that's just not in the horror genre, that's just in movies, period, right? So if we get Beetlejuice 3, again, I think it would have to be a great script. And then we have some news on The Strangers. The news is a few days old. And I was trying to rack my brain. I know we've talked about The Strangers a couple times, more specifically the original film. I know we've touched on the chapter 1 that came out earlier this year, but this news is related to chapters 2 and 3 of the prequel trilogy that were supposed to come out this year. They're obviously not going to come out this year, and now it seems like we might have some dates as to when we can expect those final two parts to that prequel trilogy. So and then we'll just wrap up the show again with some of that franchise news as far as additional sequels. So let's get right into it. So as I mentioned, The Strangers, Chapter 2 debuts first teaser as LIONSGATE pushed sequel to 2025. So again, we've talked about this franchise before. I'm a big fan of the original film. The sequel, not so much. I did enjoy Chapter 1. Again, I had high hopes for this. prequel trilogy, and I was really looking forward to getting all 3 parts this year. And again, unfortunately, that's not going to happen now. We're already almost a full week into the month of November, and obviously for that to happen, I mean, there would have to be a miracle, and they're obviously not going to release the last 2 parts to this franchise, you know, weeks apart from each other, and not try to capitalize on any box office results that they can get from it. So just jumping into this, we'll run through this pretty quickly here. Just last week, we received word from a reliable source that The Strangers Chapter 2 would miss its forecast October 2024 release and move into next year. Well, obviously it did. We're in November. Just days after we made the report, Lionsgate confirmed the news with a brand new teaser trailer for the sequel. In the short clip, we return to that same sleepy town in Oregon where life seems to be going on as normal. We witness those same diner patrons getting coffee as a pastor spouts scripture on the radio. However, something seems off. Soon we catch up with Madeline Pesich-Maya in a nearby hospital trying to recover from her horrific ordeal. Some quick cuts let us know she won't get any quality rest here as the titular strangers are seen trying to gain access. Then we have a few screen images here from what looks like obviously Chapter 2. And then let's just try to get down to where this date information is. Okay, so promising only that the movie will release in 2025. We're hearing that an official date will be announced soon. The reason behind the delay, okay, so this is where we're getting at. The reason behind the delay is said to be a short period of additional photography that took place following the May 24th release of Chapter 1. Written and directed by Rennie Harlan, a 3rd chapter has also been completed, which will also now be released later in its proposed January 2025 date. So at least, I mean, so that's some fairly good news. At least now we have confirmation that the 3rd film is also, you know, obviously we know it's done, but what pushed this back was some additional photography. So hopefully nothing else needs to be done with chapters 2 and 3, that those are just ready to go. And it's just a matter of releasing them. So as it mentions, we were supposed to get Chapter 2 last month, and then we would have gotten Chapter 3 January 2025, so in like 2 months. So that's obviously not going to happen. I'm hoping we don't have to wait until another summer release for Chapter 2 and then an end of the year release for Chapter 3. I'm hoping maybe we get something around February, March timeframe for Chapter 2, and then maybe middle summer, maybe towards the end of summer, we get Chapter 3. That'd be, I mean, for me, that'd be ideal, because again, I've been waiting to see these this year, and now we only got one of them this year. So, but at least we know that there should be no other complications, no other hangups for these last 2 chapters to get released. Now, who knows, right? Something could come up last minute where they have to make a change, they have to add something, cut something. Who knows what could happen? But based on what we know right now, that's not going to be the case. Everything seems to be done and ready to go. And then here, I'll provide this link in the description of the video. And if you want to check out the teaser trailer for Chapter 2, you can just access the article link and then scroll down. Here you go. So I'm excited for these. Like I said, I'm a fan of the original The Strangers film from 2008. Again, not so much on the sequel to that, but these prequel ones. I always like sometimes I do like a prequel when it comes to horror, because again, if we have an original film in the franchise and they don't provide any backstory whatsoever as to how the villain or the killer or whoever got to be who they are or what's driving them, you're just going into it pretty much like right in the middle of their story or towards the tail end of their story. So sometimes when we get these prequel sequels or sequel prequels, however you want to phrase that, I do like the fact that we kind of see some of the backstory on how that individual or that character got to be where they're at and why they're doing what they're doing, because sometimes we don't even get that information. And when we do, they try to bake it in as, that we're sitting around this campfire and let's tell stories, and then it's like an urban legend type story that you hear about the character, but you don't actually get to see any of it. So I'm all for these, but again, I'm all for the original film. So More to come when we find out what these actual dates will be in 2025. Again, hopefully it'll be early that we get Chapter 2. So, all right, moving on to our next topic. Does Beetlejuice have enough juice in the tank to pass one last global box office milestone? I mean, it's passed quite a few already. Like I said, surprising a lot of people, including the studio execs as well. I mean, I'd be interested to know if Tim Burton or if anyone from the cast is surprised at the amount of love this sequel is getting. But again, we know Tim Burton came in with a request for a specific amount of funds, was told no, we'll give you this, but he made it work, and it made it a success. So. All right, so even as Joker Folie à Deux practically concluded its domestic box office run this weekend, Warner Bros. Declined to report numbers for it. Not really surprised, and you all. So just a quick pause on that. So you all know my opinions on Joker Folie à Deux. I think I briefly mentioned it here. I've mentioned it over on our sister channel, Quiet on the Set. And if you haven't done so, please go over there, like, share, and subscribe, and check out the content we put out over there. But for Joker Folie à Deux, I love the first Joker film. I love the second Joker film. Are either one of them perfect films? No, I don't think there is any one perfect film that absolutely there's nothing wrong with it. But again, I loved both films. I might just be one of those outliers that I think the sequel is not necessarily being appreciated, and I think maybe in time it will be, and it will be looked back upon and get the love it deserves. I do think a lot of the hate it was getting was a lot of word of mouth hate, and a lot of people were just expecting a full-blown Joker film, and that's obviously not what was given. So anyways, let's not digress too far. WB's Beetlejuice Beetlejuice somehow continued to draw crowds. The horror comedy sequel has been playing in theaters for over 2 months now, and has also been available to watch at home for weeks. As we mentioned earlier, it's been available for streaming for quite some time. Despite that, it grossed over $2 million in its 9th weekend at the domestic box office, pushing itself closer to one last global milestone. With $292 million domestically and another $153 million from overseas markets, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice has now grossed a cumulative global total of $445 million. While its chances of hitting the $300 million mark domestically might be slim, unless WB announces a re-release, it still has a shot at hitting the $450 million mark worldwide. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice has emerged as a surprisingly solid box office hit, even though it arrives over 3 decades after the first Beetlejuice movie, which skyrocketed director Tim Burton into the big leagues. And it just goes on to talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that Tim Burton had done as far as comparing this to some of the other films that were successful, not successful. Like, for example, we know one of his least successful films was Dumbo, and he's actually and Tim Burton's actually spoken about that film after he did it, that remake, and he said he almost retired. He almost retired after that one. That one got to him pretty bad as far as the lack of acceptance or the lack of fan love that film got. So glad he didn't retire. I mean, I still think he's a great director. He's very creative, and I think like many creators out there, directors, I mean, every movie isn't going to be a smash hit. Every movie isn't going to make $1 billion. I mean, there's peaks and valleys, right? And I just happen to be one of his valleys in his career, and Beetlejuice shows that he still has it, can still be creative and create a great film. So then just, again, goes on to talk about how has also outperformed WB's Dune Part 2 domestically. And again, just some basic information about the film. So I think this is great news. I think this is especially for, again, we know Beetlejuice is classified as a horror film. It's a horror comedy, but still, nonetheless, it's a horror film. And I think this is a win for our genre. I mean, again, the more we can get films like this out there and get behind them, support them, and show how successful they can be, I think more attention we can bring to our genre, and the more horror films we can get created. And they don't necessarily always have to be like Beetlejuice, where it's a horror comedy. I think it opens the door wider for some of the more gorier films. I mean, between this film here and the success of Terrifier 3 this year, I think Terrifier 3 kicked the door open as far as especially the type of film Terrifier 3 is and the type of franchise that is, to put more eyes on the horror genre and to put more eyes on what fans are wanting to see, may like to see more of, and the studios just haven't been giving it. Now, don't get me wrong, we've gotten several classified horror films this year, and while many of them have been great in their own right, we've definitely had some misses. But when we get ones like this and get ones like Terrifier that just over, what's the word I want to say? It just outperforms. That's where I want to go. Is outperforms the expectations of the studio and outperforms as far as what budget it was given, and just brings in a ton of profit. So, would I be down for a third Beetlejuice? Again, if the script is right and everyone's on board to do it, then let's see what we can do. Otherwise, this was a great send off for the franchise and for the characters, all those involved. So we will see, but glad to see its success and again the success it brings to our genre. So next topic we have here is Matthew. So Matthew Lillard is kind of been making a rounds lately a bit, especially on his involvement in the original Scream film. He believes he's still alive. I think the vast majority of us believe he's not alive still, especially when you have the TV dropped right on top of your head, starts to short out, you start to kind of get electrocuted, and then you just don't move anymore. I think it's fair to say you've retired. But he seems to think his character is still alive somehow and wants to see about a return to the franchise at some point. But the reason why I wanted to kind of jump into this article is something specific that he mentioned. So for Scream 6, his thoughts on Scream 6 and the franchise's future. So for the first time in the franchise's history, original screenwriter Kevin Williamson will be seated in the director's chair for the upcoming Scream 7, with Neve Campbell taking center stage once more as iconic character Sidney Prescott. Fellow original Scream star Matthew Lillard has made no secret of the fact that he would like to return as well. Stu is definitely alive, he recently proclaimed, but he's excited to see Williamson's directional vision either way. I'm sorry to tell you, Matthew, Stu's not alive. Your character is done for. They bring him back. I can't even imagine how they would try to explain how he lived through that and how he would even be free from custody from police. And the third thing is how no one would know that he's still around and he's still alive out there. Like, how would Sidney, of all people, not know that information, right? Or Dewey, or just many of the original characters that happen to still be. I think there's 3 of them still around from the first film. You can't tell me none of them would realize or know that Stu has been alive this entire time. So, speaking with Games Radar Plus, Lillard offered up his thoughts on 2 Scream movies directed by Radio Silence, while also expressing his excitement about the franchise's future. Now, this is where we get into the part I want to touch on, as far as what he says about the last film. Lillard tells the outlet, "I think it's in a good place. I think that the franchise being back in the hands of Kevin Williamson is great. I love what Tyler Gillett and Matthew Bettinelli were doing before. Nothing against them. In fact, I thought they were taking a really exciting way. I thought the movie got too violent. I think 6 was like, I don't think Ghostface ever needs a shotgun," the actor continued, referring to last year's Scream 6. Pause. So the scene we're talking about here, if I'm sure the scene we're talking about here is when they're in the convenience store. The convenience store comes around the counter, has a shotgun. Ghostface comes up behind him, attacks him, gets the shotgun from him, points it at him, retires him. I thought that was an amazing sequence of scenes. Like many of these characters, whether it's Michael Myers, Jason, Freddy, Leatherface, Ghostface, it doesn't matter. I think they evolve, and we'll use Michael Myers' example. We know using a kitchen utensil is his primary weapon of choice, but we've seen him retire people in many different ways outside of that. Same thing with any of the other OG characters or villains. It's happened. They evolve. Ghostface evolves. It's going to come a lot further down the road than just using the basic hunting tool that we saw him use, or him and the various characters that played Ghostface across the sequels using. The fact that a shotgun came into play in that particular sequence, I don't see any problem with it. It's not like he was toting it around the entire movie using it. It was that particular sequence. So, yeah. So again, I have no problem with it. I think that the movies everything is trying to repeat what we did in the first movie in a lot of ways, like a maniacal monologue at the end. It's really hard to do. End quote. Lillard adds, I hope that Kevin takes in a brand new, brave, and exciting direction so that we can sort of find different colors and different joys. And just goes on to talk about Matthew's role in the first Scream. I agree. I'm all for taking the franchise, any horror franchise, in a new direction and give us something new and fresh for the character and for that world and that franchise. However, if we read that, say, takes in a brand new, brave, and exciting direction, well, then so does the villain. The villain has to go in that same direction. The villain just can't be staying stagnant from what they were in the first film or first two films, and however many sequels we get. It's just that the villain never evolves as well. The villain is going to evolve, especially in the Scream franchise, when the ones playing Ghostface are not the same people. They're not the same characters. Right, so when you have the first, in the first film, you have the original two, Ghostface villains retired. Obviously, in the sequel, we got a couple different ones, and then the same thing in the third and the fourth. So while now you have a different character with different motivations, different problems, different anger issues playing Ghostface, that villain evolves based on whatever that character is bringing to it, right? So you can't say you want a brand new, brave, and exciting direction, and then up above say, well, I don't think they should be using this type of weapon or that type of tool. You can't have it both ways. Pick one or the other, right? I'm all for a brand new, brave, and exciting direction. We're in agreement there, but then don't limit what the villain can do or the character can do as far as how they go about trying to complete their goals. So we'll see. I'm excited for this one. I'm excited for Scream 7. I love the Scream franchise. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're not all of them are great. I mean, I could definitely rank them, but I still overall enjoy them. So let's move on to the next one. All right, let's scroll down a bit here. All right, so this is as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is one of the sequels that we're getting. So now we've got confirmation that Black Phone 2 production begins on Scott Derrickson's upcoming sequel. So Ethan Hawke will be back. That's good news. As the grabber on Scott Derrickson's the Black Phone 2, and the filmmaker has revealed on socials that production is now underway on the upcoming sequel. Universal and Blumhouse will release the Black Phone 2 in theaters on October 17, 2025. So we just a little under a year before we get this, but at least it's in production, and that's good. Because we could have got news saying, delayed, it's not going to happen, what have you, but at least we now have confirmation it's in production. We have a date, obviously. Good choice date. It's going to be around the Halloween time. I think it's the best time to release a lot of these horror films because, a lot of times around Halloween we don't get many horror film releases. So I am thankful that we're starting to see that more and more. So again, for us that enjoy these films, especially around the Halloween time, it's something new for us to go out and see. So again, glad we have a date here. So we have some casting news here. We're going to skip over that. Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill will be writing and producing the upcoming sequel, with Derrickson directing. The first movie was based on Joe Hill's short story. In the first film, Finney, as a shy but clever 13-year-old boy, is abducted by a sadistic killer, who's played by Ethan Hawke, if you didn't know. and trapped in a soundproof basement where screaming is of little use. With a disconnected phone on the wall begins to ring, Finney discovers that he can hear the voices of the killer's previous victims, and they are dead set on making sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to Finney. The film was produced by Derrickson and Cargill's Crooked Highway and presented by Universal and Blumhouse. And we have some quotes here. So again, and that's pretty much where it ends. We have a picture from like a production seat. If you haven't seen the first film, definitely check it out. It's not that old either. It's only roughly 3 years old, maybe 3.5 years old. It was very successful. I think the budget for that first film was maybe 20 million, 25 million, give or take, maybe less than 20 million. I know it was a very low budget film, but it definitely earned back its budget and then some, because I believe it made over 155 million or so, give or take. Maybe a little bit more, but I know it was over 155 million. So definitely something worth checking out. I know it's available on some streaming platforms. I believe it's available on Hulu, or at least last I recall it was available on Hulu. So if you have Hulu, definitely add this one to your queue. It's worth a watch. And again, glad to see someone like Ethan Hawke taking a step out of his norm and stepping into our genre, and bringing his talents over here. Played a great role. But definitely check out the film. Like I said, it's not that old, so glad that, again. But we're getting a sequel, and that's always good news, especially for a successful horror film. All right, so our last topic for the night, we're going to keep the show short. More sequel news. We are getting... this was announced a while back, but it seems... I don't know what happened back in late 2022, because around that time we had heard we were getting a third film to this franchise, but then there hadn't really been any news since. But now today we got Orphan 3 officially announced. Lionsgate's launching Dark Castle's horror threequel at AFM. So let's jump into these details real quick. The third film in the cult Orphan horror franchise has been officially greenlit, with Isabelle Fuhrman, recently seen in Kevin Costner's Horizon, returning to play her iconic role of Esther, and Orphan First Killer's writer David Cogshall, The Family Plan, and directed William Brent Bell, also back behind the camera. So pause there if you didn't know. Obviously there was Orphan 1. Orphan First Killer was a prequel to the first film, and that's where the character Esther comes in, that they're referring to as far as Orphan First Kill is the prequel to the first film, second film released. The feature of which plot details are currently being kept under wraps was announced by production banner Dark Castle Entertainment, with Lionsgate set to launch the project at the American film market this week. Quote, Dark Castle is excited to announce another terrifying chapter in the Orphan saga, said Norman Golotsky, co-CEO of Dark Castle Entertainment. With the past success of the first two movies and another thrilling storyline, we are confident that Orphan 3 will be a must-see movie for both current fans of the franchise and new fans alike. Dark Castle is producing Orphan 3 with Alex Mace of Gnosis Films, David Leslie, Jonathan McGoldrick will also serve as an executive producer. Lionsgate's handling international sales. Then we kind of go on to how well the first one did, and the prequel did as far as budget, box office results, when they were released, and then this goes on just to talk about some of the other films that the directors and creators have been involved in. That really wraps it up. So we got it greenlit. That's good news. It's already moving forward. We have, at least we know who's returning as far as one of the main characters and actresses, so that's good news as well. Obviously one of the big things we don't have is a date, and we don't know specifically the story. I'm more so on the date than the story. I think obviously the story always comes with time, but I mean, as soon as we know the dates for these things, I always feel it gives us a little bit more of a foot to stand on, because we know what we're shooting for. And then we know, obviously, if things get pulled in or pushed out or even delayed, we can start to kind of speculate, hey, what's going on? Why is this being delayed when there was so much enthusiasm to bring it to the audience? So still good news. Still good news that it's greenlit and we're getting a third one to this franchise. And obviously, we'll find out once it gets closer, once it gets released, if they decide to do a fourth one, or this could just be the final chapter in this franchise. So we'll see. We'll monitor this one as well. So, all right, everyone. That wraps it up for tonight's topics. Like I said, I wanted to keep this show pretty small tonight, pretty short. So, we will be back at it. Our plan is to be back at it tomorrow. I know there's a lot of things going on, tomorrow, a lot of busy schedules tomorrow. So if we can, we will definitely do a daily drop tomorrow. It might be much shorter than normal. We might keep it just to 15, 20 minutes, just covering maybe, one or two topics and then just rounding it out. But otherwise, we will be back tomorrow. If you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It does help us out as we get this thing up off the ground. And as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't checked out our sister channel yet, Quiet on the Set, where we talk about pretty much everything else movie or TV related, excluding horror. Horror will stay here. Horror will always be here on this channel, unless there's something just absolutely massive news that we would cover over there. We would just briefly just mention it, but direct everyone over here for all the details. Because again, this is a horror channel, and that's what we want to focus on. So, all right, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Again, but if you're already on Tuesday, I hope you enjoy your Tuesday and have a great day. And we will see you at the next one. Peace.